This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law. I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows and welcome. We are so glad to see you here on the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast. We're going to jump right into it because we got a lot to cover today. Joining me as always is Pam Hill, pharmacist and victims advocate. She's experienced violent crime in her own life, but we're not tapping into that knowledge today. We're going to rely heavily on Pam's experience as a pharmacist. We're talking about some serious allegations involving Pace Pharmacy. It's a pharmacy right here in Northwest Florida where, as you know, if you follow this podcast, we cover all kinds of crazy cases that bubble up here and beyond. Well, we don't have to go beyond to talk about a crazy case today. This is a very serious issue involving a pharmacy called Pace Pharmacy right here in the Florida Panhandle. Pace is a bedroom community of Pensacola, if you're not familiar. And essentially, we've had two pharmacists and an office manager charged with basically running a criminal organization of drug distribution. A la, think, Pablo Escobar. I'm not talking that it's international, but essentially they were delivering illicit drugs, compounding them, distributing them in a way that describes a criminal enterprise. And they're all doing it under the guise of being a legitimate pharmacy. And these are the allegations. These folks, we're going to give you their names and their details in just a second. But before we get into that, I do want to ask you to like and subscribe, please, if you have not done that yet. And this episode is going to be called Pace Pharmacy, Compounding a Pill Mill. So what that means is this is being described as one of the largest, if not the largest, pill mill operation in the country from right here in little old Northwest Florida. So Pam, you want to tell us a little bit about these pharmacists that were arrested and the office manager? We can tell you their names, okay. Stephen Burklow and David Winkles, along with the pharmacy office manager, who is Stephen Burklow's wife, Monique Burklow, all arrested May 14th by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. But y'all, this is a multi-agency investigation, and it all started in 2020 based on other investigations, including the arrest of a Gulf Breeze obstetrician and gynecologist, Dr. Elaine Sharp, who is charged with murder over the overdose deaths of patients. And she was telling patients to get her prescriptions filled at Pace Pharmacy because guess what, y'all? Other pharmacies in the area were not filling them. So Pam, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you've learned about this. And we both read the report, so we're going to share and talk about it as we go along.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, pharmacy, I just want to start with this.
Yes.
Just like everything else, pharmacists are inherently good. Nobody chooses to go into the healthcare field, I don't think, initially going, let me see what I can do to do flim, flam, rim-a-ram, or problems with people. So, and as pharmacists, we have a corresponding duty as the doctor does. We don't diagnose, we dispense prescriptions. And we're making sure that is this right, and like a team. But we can't do our job without them, and they can't do theirs without us. So it works into a beautiful system.
Right, when it's legal.
When it's legal, right. So I just want to start out with that, and I just want to, as just 100% transparency here. I know David Winkles, and he's a friend of mine. I like him. And this has really gobsmacked me. All of this has. But here we are in Pace, Florida. We have physicians that are prescribing outside the parameters. And pharmacy has changed. 39 years ago yesterday, I graduated from pharmacy school. And it was my birthday. It was the happiest day of my life. Never did I think standing on that campus that I'd be talking about this.
Yes, ever. I know. And just reading some of the details in this, essentially, they've been under investigation since 2020 when Dr. Sharp was busted and charged. And the allegations out of that case, which we have not done an episode yet on, we were planning to get to it. Right. Now we're sort of jumping ahead and sort of combining all of this. But, essentially, they're accused of dispensing drugs in excessive and inappropriate quantities. And that is just a simple way of saying everything from conspiring to traffic prescription drugs, including oxycodone, hydrocodone. We're talking an operation worth tens of millions of dollars. So one of the allegations in the drug charges includes trafficking over 22 kilograms of oxycodone, also 26 kilograms of hydrocodone. That's worth $22 million alone, according to just a quick Google search. And by the way, if you Google search 26 kilograms of hydrocodone and how much is it worth, Google loses its mind. They're like, first of all, we got an answer for you, but we ain't going to tell you until we let you know. You better not be doing anything illegal. You're not supposed to. You can't do it. I don't know if this is Steve Burklow Googling this, but you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. So it's just interesting. This is serious, and we all know it. If you're familiar at all with the opioid crisis, if you've watched Dope Sick, if you've followed any of the litigation involving governments as well as individuals that have sued on behalf, of people that have become addicted and died or suffered debilitating injuries, these are powerful drugs, and the addictive qualities of them, as anyone who's been impacted by them knows, it's destroying families, it's destroying lives. This is why this is so serious, but people need it. There are people who are legitimately suffering, and this makes it even harder for those individuals to get the pain medications that they need. So essentially, these allegations center around compounding these opioid drugs. They're using legitimate prescriptions. They're doing refills that were not legitimate, but based on legitimate prescriptions. They were going around and doing doctor shopping, essentially getting legitimate prescriptions and then taking some of those pills. And anyway, there's just so much that we're going to get into. But they were selling them on the black market illegally, defrauding insurance companies, according to these allegations, abusing the medical billing and prescription systems to cover their tracks. And they were diverting large amounts of prescription opioids as well as the ingredients for opioids. That's where the compounding comes in, and we're going to rely on your expertise to describe some of that and how you do compound it. So basically, they were using already made drugs. They were making their own drugs. They were bringing in the ingredients to make these opioids, allegedly, according to these reports, from China, as well as other pharmacies that they were using to tap into their legitimate sources of opioids. So they were diverting all of this into the black market where they could make the most money, because that $22 million is based on an illegal black market for that 26 this 26 amount of the hydrocodone. So, you make some, honestly, obviously when it's legit, but you make much more when it's on the black market. So that's essentially what they've described in these reports. And Stephen Burklow is at the heart of all of it, according to FDLE.
Well, but first of all, like pharmacy, drugs, you go get a prescription for blood pressure medicine.
Right.
That is called a legend drug. It's a drug that requires a prescription to have it dispensed to you. There's a difference between filling a prescription and dispensing it. Dispensing it is all the professional knowledge you have and all the things that you need to keep in mind to make sure you're patient. You're not a customer anymore in a pharmacy. You are a patient. So these legend drugs, they used to say federal law prohibits dispensing without a prescription.
Right.
That's the legend.
That's where it begins.
That's right.
That's rule number one.
And what we're talking about here, we're not talking about somebody getting extra Lipitor or this, that. We are talking about opiates. We are talking about controlled substances.
Right. For example, I just went and had a B12. For the first time in my life, I'm getting a B12 prescription. I had to go and get that filled. My insurance copay, I ended up having to only pay $1.50.
Right.
So if I were to go and get hydrocodone, there's obviously far more steps that you'd have to go to. You'd have to get it from a legitimate pain management doctor or a doctor that's able to prescribe those sorts of highly regulated drugs. But, all of that's tracked through your insurance companies. How much you order, how much you're given, and pharmacies are alerted, or the government and these agencies are assigned to regulate and monitor these amounts, particularly with opioids and addictive drugs. They have to, they have to be notified. They're allowed a certain amount to, these pharmacies and doctors are allowed a certain amount to prescribe. And if they go over that, then it becomes an alert if the system's working properly.
And and it just depends on all that. The controlled substances, they're also tracked through the DEA. That's not just the insurance. That's why some people go around their insurance. There's red flags in pharmacy. If someone wants to only pay cash, if they don't want to go through their insurance, if they're in there and they're too friendly. I mean, there are so many red flags that happen. And if they only want to deal with one pharmacist all the time.
And according to these reports, just what you were saying, at the base of it, they're dispensing these narcotics, legal and otherwise, without a prescription. And Additionally, Stephen Burklow, through the Pace Pharmacy, according to these reports, billed multiple insurance companies using various physicians' national provider identification numbers, or NPIs, without their knowledge or consent for prescriptions that may or may not have been provided to patients. According to Burklow's arrest report, Pace Pharmacy also regularly filled, refilled, or sold narcotics without a valid prescription in exchange for cash through the drive-thru or rear door of the pharmacy. And people who helped this operation were also known as sponsors, according to detectives. So this investigation includes a lot of basically confidential informants as well as defendants turning over information. And I would imagine they're implying that that's Dr. Elaine Sharp, that when they busted her. And again, going through, and this has been going on since 2020, around the time when she was busted. So one man said, he tells detectives that he was selling oxycodone prescriptions, paying people to obtain the controlled substance prescriptions, filled them at a pharmacy, and in return, he got part of those meds back. So this is something I wanted to ask you about, too. There's so much that comes up in this, but they talk a lot about the labeling of the bottles and the amounts.
Okay.
And when the detectives began to realize that this is what was happening, they confronted Stephen Burklow about it, and he became nervous. So tell me a little bit about how this business works. Like, how do you defraud insurance? How do you defraud your own system to keep from alerting the government that you're selling excess amounts of opioids? How do you divert it from a legit prescription to something that goes on the black market? And they describe it in these reports, but I want people to understand how they're getting around the system, how it's supposed to work normally, and how they're getting around it.
Well, first of all, you can't do it for very long because our system is very good.
Then how did he do this for so long?
I'm going to tell you how he did it. All right. You basically have wholesalers. We fill out a 222 form. That is for controlled substances. That goes to our wholesaler, and it's like many, many copies. We keep a copy. The wholesaler keeps a copy. They send a copy to the DEA when you get the medicines back. And everywhere I've worked, we've had one pharmacist in charge of that. And then everything balances. 1 + 1 is 2. You know, but the way people get around it is by mislabeling, or there's something in every prescription has to have a label on it.
Right.
There.
You've got some bottles right here.
Yeah. And that's acyclovir. That's just an antiviral right there.
Right.
So that has to have a prescription on it. And you can see right here, it'll say RX only. That they shortened the legend drug to just say RX only.
Right. It talks about how much is in there, how many pills, as well as the milligrams.
Right. And see, that's a stock bottle right there. We typically, back in the day, we never dispensed stock bottles because it just didn't look professional.
Right. It would be more like these little brown bottles. This is what I would be used to getting.
That's pharmacy
But a lot
stuff.
of these folks were using these stock bottles.
And that's how part of this got around. The label on there, in the pharmacy, there's intake, there's data entry, there's production, there's verification with the pharmacist, and then there's another verification here at the counter with the patient. That's why people say, how come it takes so long to fill my prescription? In a normal pharmacy, that's it. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different stations. But when you're doing an enterprise like this, you're like, I take your script in, I data entry it, I count it, I go out there and sell it to you. I verify it. You kept everybody out of it. And then they just slap a label on a stock bottle. You know, they're not doing that for the patients in the pharmacy. They're compounding over here with some extra ingredient they've gotten from somewhere, a precursor, the things we need to make an illicit drug.
And just to clarify, y'all, precursor is the ingredient. In fact, as Pam was enlightening me, the very term, pharmacy RX, RX means
recipe.
Recipe.
In Latin. And it also means, and then we have artem secundum on there. Every one of us, when we graduate from pharmacy school, get a mortar and pestle like that.
That's pretty cool. Can you hand that to me?
Sure, it's heavy. Let me hand it to you. I love this so much. I'm fixing to cry because I love being a pharmacist so much. And that means do this according to the arts and sciences.
Right. So those who can't see or are just listening, basically it's the little bowl with the little handheld tool that, you can crush your drugs.
Yeah. It's so fun when you're in pharmacy school and you're learning how to compound. There's no need to compound things that are already proprietary drugs. That's where you see things are getting crazy. Why do you need, I don't need to compound Lipitor. It's readily available, but it's a way, it's almost like a special thing, like, oh, I made this for you, Well,
I remember when I was breastfeeding my daughter right after she was born, 10 years ago, and my body was like, yeah, we're okay about producing milk, but we don't want to do it all the time and in great quantities. So they sent me to a pharmacy that compounded to make a special prescription that would help basically induce milk production.
Right.
And it did work.
Right. And that's what compounding is, customized prescription. And that's wonderful. But those things typically don't go through insurance. Not everybody does them. I'm not particularly a person that enjoys compounding because it's just not my thing.
Well, it sounds like it's something that's not necessarily necessary, you were saying.
Yeah. And for some people it is, though.
Right.
But I enjoy patient consultation. I enjoy seeing how I can help you with your medicines and your vitamins and your joy of life. That's what I like doing. I like being a pharmacist that way. So it takes all of us together. But what they were doing there is if you are selling drugs out on the street, a stock bottle like this that is sealed is primo dollars.
The white plastic bottles.
Because they're selling it on the street and they're not exactly the most outstanding citizens. You know, they're like, if you say, here, this is, oxycodone. If it's in that bottle there and it's from the wholesaler, then that carries a big, big price. But you still have to keep up with the bookkeeping. So if you over here got some extra over here for your regular patients coming in the pharmacy, you're compounding for them. Nobody needs to be compounding oxycodone on a big level. It is readily available in so many different milligrams, and we can use it. Every pharmacy has a quota of what they can sell. And we always talk about peer review with like Ben Brown and Shaknowski and stuff. Pharmacists have peers. There's 24,000 people that live in Pace, where we are right now. And if somebody's selling 24,000 tablets a month, does that mean everybody in Pace, every man, woman, and child took an oxycodone?
Right.
It's too much. We're so smart. Anybody doing this right here is going to get caught. But here's the sad part. In between the middle, people are dying. Dr. Sharp is indicted for 2 murders with them looking at maybe as many more as 30 plus. And it's because the system got out of whack. But to build a case, it takes, as you can see, 4 or 5 years.
You and I both know someone who regularly used Pace Pharmacy, and he was a cancer patient. He needed pain medications. This is not part of the investigation. This is just anecdotal, just what we know about it. And he said towards the end of his life that some of the compounded medications that he was receiving were not having the desired effect, that he felt like they were weaker. And I think to some extent, obviously we didn't know this was happening, but we felt like, well, maybe his just tolerance was so high, it wasn't having the same impact. We don't know.
Right.
And that may very well be the case. But in this situation, knowing what we now know, it does make you wonder, because what you're describing is that they were diverting, and according to these reports, they were diverting the legitimate prescription meds to the street where they could make more money, and then they were compounding their own, either using these precursor ingredients, like you said, or perhaps not even at all. So according to these reports, they would file one prescription, and then they would give for like oxycodone or hydrocodone, and then they would get refills for cash. So the first prescription would be filed under insurance, but then they would refill for cash, and then they were delivered by delivery drivers for the pharmacy. And this is just one part of this operation, according to these allegations. Concerned family members were contacting law enforcement about the amounts that they were receiving their family members get. There was the sketchy labeling on the bottles, like you were talking about, the types of bottles that they were. And when these refills were delivered and cash was received, the drivers would then allegedly take it back to Stephen Burklow and give him the cash. And they said it was, quote unquote, normal practice for Burklow to operate this way. Prescriptions were also being, quote unquote, set to the side instead of being stamped as they were filled. And I'd love for you to explain that a little bit when patients return for refills. And David Winkles is also accused of doing this too. So he's basically accused of selling large quantities of these controlled substances diverted from the pharmacy and then turning around and selling them to other people. So you've got that they're delivering directly to patients, bringing back cash. You've got other people that are basically operating to take pills and sell it on the street. And this is just all that we know. I feel like there's going to be so much more that comes out of all of this. I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg. And all of these steps that they're taking are basically to avoid detection from whether it's pharmacies that provide, or drug manufacturers that provide these opioids, like McKesson is mentioned in these reports, as well as you mentioned the DEA or the Florida Healthcare for Administration, Florida, the state agency that oversees these things, and to keep from alerting to them that they're using more than they need. They apparently, according to these reports too, he was selling 3 times the amount of opioids for this geographical region. You talked about the population of Pace. That's what they were saying. He was selling 3 times the amount of these regulated opioids than anybody else in the region. And some folks were traveling an estimated 30 and 40 miles just to get their prescriptions filled. So all of those are the red flags that you're talking about.
Right, exactly. And one of the ways that these things are getting, technicians are not dummies. Sales clerks are not dummies. People in the bookkeeping office are not dummies. Everybody sees this, and a person getting involved in this, they get into that arrogance and that nobody's going to touch me and I do what I want. I mean, this is our profession. This is a helping profession. The money part of it, when that starts being your only goal, you're going to do some not so cool stuff, and every script has to have a label that goes out. But I told you about the 5 steps, data entry, Anybody can go over to the computer and do label only, label only, label only. And I could label all this stuff oxycodone, or I can label it all Lipitor. But the thing is, as the pharmacist, it's like being the ship's captain. You're watching everybody, not necessarily with an evil eye, but if I see somebody over there putting out a lot of labels only, I'm going to go stand over there and go, what's going on here? Or
putting something to the side.
Right, exactly. See, that has to go. And that's what a pharmacist, that is our duty. It's not the techs and everything. But if you got someone going to the bathroom too many times, somebody staying in the drug closet too long, somebody said, I'll get the drive-thru. I'll always get the drive-thru. I can tell you, I can spot this stuff a mile away. I've been a pharmacist 39 years. I worked in 40 different stores for one of the major chains as a troubleshooter. That's what they would send me there for.
You know how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, I do. And it's beautiful when it works that way. It's great for our patients. It's such, I can't quit saying it. I love being a pharmacist. I can't imagine anybody wanting to do this
your
to
calling.
Our patients. Because addiction is not a moral failing. Addiction is a disease, and we don't need to be helping people, get further down this rabbit hole. And then yet here we got our legitimate pain people. Now, all these extra things, you used to go to your doctor and they'd give you your pain medication. And our state here in Florida is one of the strictest states there is. I can't believe that all this even went on this long.
Well, and that's just it too. Coming up in this investigation, you realize that what led to this was not just Dr. Elaine Sharp's investigation, but these guys had been busted repeatedly before for similar type allegations, but not to this scale. And they had been reprimanded, and it's like it was building up to this. But apparently, in my opinion, it appears that Stephen Burklow never took it seriously, the punishments that he was, given before for trying to defraud insurance companies, for basically what you call the flim-flam rim-a-ram on any number of ways. And he had all these different partners. There were, there's just a lot that we're going to dive into, and this will have to be a multi-part series.
Definitely.
But essentially, he had been investigated on similar allegations before, just not to this extent. And then it led to this. So one of my questions is for these regulatory agencies, how does this happen under your watch?
I think part of it is to build these cases, it does take them a long time.
Absolutely.
Because they get one bite at that apple usually.
Well, this is solid to me, in my opinion. Not that I know. I'm not an expert, but it seems like it was building this way.
If someone keeps moving sideways, they keep their feet moving. It's like football. You can't get tackled if you keep your feet moving, but this is what's happened. But you've had employees that have told, you have patients that have told. I don't know why anybody thinks this is going to be the best kept secret in the world. This is wrong.
I know. Well, it's like so many cases we talk about. I think when people get away with something for long enough, that arrogance, that untouchableness kicks in, and they just think they can get away with it. And I would like to take a moment to thank our regular supporter of this show, Zarzar Law. Joe Zarzar, personal injury attorney right here in Pensacola, fights for his victims, is a voice for the voiceless, and he handles a lot of these cases that deal with medical malpractice, including people who die or hurt when they don't have to, when, through no fault of their own, they were injured, or some sort of medical malpractice or negligence that led to a death. And so we want to thank him for this support of this show and the ability for us to be able to share some of this knowledge. And we would encourage anyone, if you are looking for a personal injury attorney, to give Zarzar Law a call. I know that's who I would call if I needed a personal injury attorney. So we just wanted to go ahead and thank him for that and continue on with what we're talking about with this investigation into Steve Burklow, as well as David Winkles, as well as Monique Burklow. And I know you dove a little bit more into the reports involving David and Monique, but it seems like everything that we both read, Stephen Burklow is the ringleader, if you will, of all of this. It's his operation, and everybody's working for him. And before we get into that, I do want to mention, since a lot of this centers around the drive-thru, I went by Pace Pharmacy over there on Woodbine Road, and, they've got adjusted hours. It looked all but empty, but I did take notice physically of that drive-thru area. There are the old-fashioned bars on the window on the opposite side of the glass, which would be like inside the pharmacy, which is not unusual, but what did strike me is most inmates maybe it's just the difference between privately owned pharmacies and corporate owned pharmacies, but they usually have in the bigger pharmacies, those roll down things that you would, use to lock the windows and doors to keep people from getting in. But they just have the good old-fashioned bars, which nothing wrong with that. But then you go around and you look at the back door, and there's an additional privacy fence that is covering the very back door. And there's nothing wrong with that until you start looking into these allegations, and you're like, okay, people are coming to the back door, apparently, according to the police, for their drugs, for these cash transactions. So naturally, a privacy fence is going to be used to hide, according to this report, illicit behavior, illegal behavior, drug transactions.
Right.
These guys were basically, according to the police, just regular street drug dealers like you see painted in crime shows and movies and biographies, but they were doing it all under the guise of a legitimate pharmacy. And some people that were working for them some of these technicians didn't even have the proper licenses. So they were cutting corners in every single way possible and just rolling in the dough, according to the police.
Yeah, I feel like the thing with the technicians, it was that their registrations weren't current and stuff, but that's a small thing. But when you stop doing the small things, you stop doing all the things because you're untouchable. Nobody's untouchable in pharmacy or medicine like this. The sad part is the currency is the people that get caught in the middle that are either doing drugs on their own. Like I said, it's not a moral failing, it's a disease. And the people that have chronic pain. Do you know how hard it is for somebody in the state of Florida just to get their pain medication? And then after a while, my mother had chronic pain. And I watched how some doctors talked to my mother, and I went to my mother's doctor appointment with her. And I'm like, I don't know how you talk to other people's mother, but you don't talk to mine that way. Because my mother's not a drug seeker. She has chronic pain. But it's just such a sad place to be. Molly, I have had people come up to me, look me right in the face and say, I will do anything you say if. And that is so sobering and so sad. But I mean, they can't even stand up and wash dishes. They can't even put the milk back in the thing. They can't hold their grandbaby. Who wants to be in pain? We understand people want to get out of pain, but we cannot. These are people this is taking advantage of people that are in a precarious place, and it's not right.
Right. And I know there's debate over exactly what addiction is, if it's a disease, if it's a choice, that sort of thing. But whatever your thoughts are, biologically and physiologically, when your body is addicted, it is making it hard for you to concentrate and do anything else. And thank God I have not had to deal with that sort of problem. But I feel like everybody has a way of coping with pain, coping with problems in life. Some people turn to drugs, some people turn to alcohol, some people turn to other behaviors. We've talked about in this podcast before, people that are addicted to speeding, people that are addicted to sex, people that are addicted to basically manipulating other people, whatever it is that gives them that momentary feeling of feel good and to feel better. But when you're talking about physical pain or physical addiction, you're fighting your own body.
Right.
No matter how much will you have, no matter how much you might not want to do this, you're fighting against your own body. And that breaks my heart that people like this. Again, these are allegations. We're not saying they're accused. And Stephen Burklow is still in the Santa Rosa County Jail being held without bond. But David Winkles and Monique Burklow have made bond, and they're now out. So we will see what they, plead. But right now, it appears that they're all going to say not guilty. I believe they have pled not guilty at their first appearances. So we'll see how it progresses. But at any rate, whether or not they meant to do it or not, they are taking advantage of people that are hurting and truly are addiction. And I remember covering this, years ago when it came to Dr. Graves. I covered that back in the 1990s. Another doctor in Pace who was convicted of 4 counts of manslaughter related to prescribing opioids to addicts. People were passing out in his parking lot. There were fights in his parking lot when they were lined up waiting to get these prescriptions from him. And he became the first doctor in the United States to be found liable for recklessly prescribing patients painkillers that led to deadly addiction. I interviewed the families of people who died from this addiction. One of the first couples that I interviewed, their son was a construction worker. He'd hurt himself on the job. He didn't have good insurance, but he had enough to help him get some pain meds. This was at the very beginning of the opioid crisis. And he was prescribed these heavily, strongly addictive prescriptions, became addicted, This is a man who had regularly held down a job, had been living a good life, if you will, had problem-free, crime-free. But he ended up becoming an addict and doing things that he probably wouldn't have done. I interviewed another family whose loved one robbed a bank, went to prison because of his addiction took a hold of him. And they were all patients of Dr. Graves. So these are just two small examples, not to mention the people that died.
Oh, yeah.
And that's related to the manslaughter charges, just like Dr. Elaine Sharp is facing. She's facing murder charges as well. And I think you were telling me they think she may even be responsible for up to 40 deaths.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I know there's perhaps some people who don't have sympathy for those who die from addiction. But again,
I do.
These people, and I certainly do too as well, but I'm just saying that these people are, tapping into and taking advantage of what is a very real problem and a very real way that your body reacts to these things. They just want to feel better. But yeah, so here it is. Here we are again in Pace, Florida, the center of some huge groundbreaking case. What is going on? Yeah. Is it because nobody expects it to be happening in this small community, if you will, this bedroom community of Pensacola that is growing by leaps and bounds, by the way?
Oh, yeah, it's nice here. What's happening is when you try to do the right thing, you get slapped down a lot of times.
Yes.
And let's just go back to Dr. Graves for a minute. Amongst pharmacists, this Dr. Graves was in his heyday when we didn't have many chains. We had about 30 independent pharmacies. And Dr. Graves would prescribe an opiate. He'd prescribe a benzo like Xanax or anything, Valium. And then he would prescribe a muscle relaxer like Soma. And Soma, that was, everybody got that. So your pharmacist going, everybody, his and her medicine, every script like that. So a lot of us sent him a letter and said, I will not be filling your prescriptions. And then you get a letter back and go, you can't do that. And you're like, yes, I can. And back and forth. And then they want to talk about you, but that's fine. That's all fine. But what people would do with that cocktail that he had, they go in, and like you said, they pay people to go in and get prescriptions. Isn't that something? You go in, but you get a little bit back, and then you give it to the other person that paid your way in there, and they sell them.
A kickback scheme.
Yeah, exactly. Just like what we were talking about with PBMs with legitimate pharmacy. But what main thing I saw when I was down in the like 9th Avenue, East Hill area down there, what they would love to do with that Soma is take that Soma and poke the bottom of a beer can like that with a pin and then just, chug
shotgun
that.
it.
And then they had what they would call their own very made Quaalude filling. And Quaaludes were like the thing in the 70s. That's what people love.
I've seen the movies. Yeah. I heard tales.
Well, it was some bad stuff, So all that going on, they do their cocktails. And as a pharmacist, you start looking at this and going, are you really a pharmacist? A doctor? Are you just rubber stamping stuff? And then I'll be dang if they didn't go to pads where it was already stamped or written out like that, or their nurse wrote it and they just signed it. Because back in the day when I was a little girl, the pharmacists and pharmacies could supply the script pads to the doctor. And on the back would say, like, take this to ABC Pharmacy. Well, that's called patient steering, and that is illegal.
And that's what Sharp is accused of doing as well, that she was sending her patients to Pace Pharmacy because nobody else was filling her scripts.
Because the rest of us were like, no, we're not filling these. And I have a folder right here where in Alabama, I refused to fill a prescription a couple of years ago. And the man was from Montgomery. I was in Birmingham. He comes in on his phone and goes, hey, yelling at me, here's my doctor on my phone. I don't talk on people's cell phone. Here's my doctor on my phone. He wants to give you a script. Call in a script that you can't even call in. Hey,
from out of area.
Right. You're in my pharmacy and I can, I'm not trying to be judgmental, but I see what I see and you're acting a damn fool. And he comes in, then he's pressuring me, basically kind of getting, physically like, there's a counter here, and I've had that done many, many times. But I told him, I said, I'm not filling your prescription. I'm honest. I'm not going to say we're out of it, or I'm not going to lie to you. I simply am not doing it. Well, he got mad. He went and sat out in his truck for 30 or 40 minutes. Then he tries to call the owner of the store. Then he comes back in. He's got everybody scared. So I call the police to come up there. They come up there. They send him out. Well, all that being done, that was stressful enough. Then I get something from the Board of Pharmacy where they come and visit me, two men come and visit me and go, why did you not fill that prescription? I said, I don't even have to have a reason, but I use my professional judgment. And they're like, oh, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. But for 2 years, I had to be tied down with that. And I just about 6 months ago got a letter that said, oh, never mind. That is why people don't say anything, because they just make a lie up and go, we don't have it. I do not lie to you.
It's a hassle.
Right. I'm not going to tell you what's in stock. You're going to call me, do you have 30 OxyContin 30s? Well, I'm going to tell you that so you can come up later and kill us.
Well, just you're talking about that. Like I said, I went and got that B12 prescription filled, and I was speaking with the pharmacist. We were talking about this case, Pace Pharmacy, a little bit, just the highlights of what's made the news. And he said, Molly, it's constant. He said, you never know who's going to walk in. I was telling him some of your stories, including the one where you talked about the person came in and said, I'll do anything for it. And you're like, good Lord, I see the implication in this, and this is awful. And not even long before I walked in, it was either that day or the day before, he said a man had walked in with a baseball cap and a mask. He said that caught his attention, but he was back there working, filling prescriptions. So he was working with a tech, an assistant there, and she was checking him out, and he wanted $400 worth of pills that essentially were addictive, and he wanted to pay with a charge card. Well, it wasn't going through.
Yeah.
And so he said, can you tap it in manually? Yeah. And he was a fast talker, and he was just about to talk her into doing it when it caught the pharmacist's ear, and he came around and he was like, hey, I don't think this is right. This is not our policy. She is not going to plug that number in. She didn't want to plug it in either because, they want to follow the rules and do what's right. But the bottom line was he was giving her some sob story. And hiding his face. And he was like, we're not in COVID anymore, although I know there's a need and people still do wear masks. It just, all of it together was a red flag. And he said, you need to go somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, and they don't do it. They do it to the staff and stuff, but when the pharmacist comes out there, because the staff can tell them the very same thing and nicely, and they're like, yelling at them and being hateful. Not everybody's like that, but people that are doing some of this flim flam rim around are. And you can go out there as the pharmacist and go, can I help you? And they're like, oh, no, we really can't, get out of here,
right.
Type of thing. But I mean, we are in a very dangerous profession. And I've had one older pharmacist tell me this. He said, Pam, you've got drugs, you've got money, you've got women, what else in the world?
Right. Just like these cartels that I watch. I love me some narcos. You've heard me say it many times, just watching how that whole business came up and how the U.S. government got involved in cracking down on these cartels and investigating them and developing sources. But essentially, Pablo Escobar made a huge empire out of cocaine because he was already an established smuggler. So basically, drug distribution is, are you legally distributing it or are you illegally doing it? And if it's illegal, then you're just a smuggler.
Right. And I mean, I can look at people sometimes and see, I've had people come in and go, they start the slang talk. I need my Zanzies, or I need my OCs, or I need my perp. And I'm like, what I don't talk like that.
Right, that's a red flag. Well, and one of the patients that came up in this arrest report for Steve Burklow, one patient went to the pharmacy when Steve wasn't there. It was a patient that would raise red flags, if you will, based on this description. And he's speaking to one of these, I don't know if this was a confidential informant, but basically somebody that they were working with who was, turning evidence and talking to detectives about how it worked. And he said that this person came in when Steve wasn't there, and this patient asked for quote unquote purple, which is the street name apparently for cough syrup with codeine and promethazine.
Yeah.
And then this person also said, because I want to hear you talk about that, but I just want to get this in real quick, that sometimes Burklow would also hand off bottles to customers with only a handshake. And it turned out it wasn't just like, here, good to see you. It was sliding a little cash, a little Franklin's, a little Washington's, a little whoever, Anyway, sliding him some money with the handshake.
Right. Everything should go through all the channels. When people start taking shortcuts and doing their own thing, I love the way that we have it set up where I work in Birmingham. We have all the stations, and all of them laugh at me when I hear somebody out in the lobby acting a fool. I go out there because, it's ultimately going to be my problem. So I go ahead and get there early and go, they're like, why is it taking so long? All you got to do is slap a label on that Z-Pack. And I'm like, nice to know you think that highly of our profession, but here you go. Thank you. So I tell them I have data entry, all the stuff I told you. Data entry, production, verification. And I'm like, don't you want us to do that for you? And if you don't, hey, let me tell you this. I have zero interest in being your pharmacist.
Absolutely. And that's what it takes.
Yeah.
It takes people that are willing to
They
have
don't know
integrity.
how to act like that because, I mean, I really do. I got so many people behind you that want to do things the legit way and do appreciate what we're doing, and we appreciate them. I mean, how wonderful is it to have a pharmacist has to wear like a lot of hats. We are the only professional that you can walk up to without an appointment and go, you can walk up to me and go about your daughter. Pam, does she need stitches? I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm not an expert in anything, but I'm maybe somebody that's seen a lot of that stuff. We are the only professionals in healthcare that deal with money. And when you touch someone's money, you become a merchant. It's not nurses don't do it, doctors don't do it. A lot of therapists don't do it.
Well, and that ends up blurring the lines, like you said, between customer and patient.
Right,
because when I'm
exactly.
reading this report, I'm thinking, look at these customers,
Yes,
but you're saying, no, they're patients. And I'm like, well, how are you a patient or a customer?
Right. Because it's which hat you have on and which one.
That's messy.
Yeah,
That's unfortunate.
I love business, but the business part of pharmacy will take care of itself if we get these PBMs straight and people respect what we know, our knowledge. I am a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy pharmacist. There are plenty of pharmacists nowadays that are PharmDs. They're doctorate in pharmacy. So, I mean, we are evolving and things are getting better and better. And just healthcare, I mean, people are living longer and better. But if you're only a customer type person and a merchant, go sell candy bars or something. This is not like that.
It's not right to ask pharmacists to do that.
It's not. And that is why I've hardly ever run a cash register in my life. I've had to at our party store and stuff. But let us be the professionals we are. And then when you work in chains, you'll get a note most mornings go, here's your metrics today. You need to sell 25 flu shots. You need to do this. And here's how I had one recruiter one time tell me, yeah, we got a great pharmacist in there that will be your partner. She can fill 75 scripts in an hour. And I thought to myself, she's got to be the pharmacist I've ever heard of.
Pharmacist I've ever heard of.
35 seconds on each prescription. Nobody's that brilliant.
Well, and who wants a pharmacist that has to crank it out that fast?
Well,
what if
that's
there's
what
a
it
mistake
is.
that's made? And it really should be about the consultation.
Right.
It should be, in my opinion, about the interaction and making sure that people are getting the help they need.
Right. Let's don't put the money on the prescription part of it. Make your money up front, because my dad was a businessman, an entrepreneur, and when my dad saw how pharmacy was, he was like, man, they've made the prescription department the Jezebel of the whole store.
Right. I know. Well, I tell you what, there is so much more to dive into, y'all. This is going to be a multi-episode. We're just getting into the beginning of this. And as we start to wrap it up, I do want to ask you a little bit about how China comes into this and how these ingredients, these precursors, that's what I want to know. Okay. When I'm reading these reports, and I know you don't have all the answers, but you've got a little bit more information about why they believe China is connected to this. But it seems to me like he's just got this operation rocking and rolling. He's making money hand over fist. He's basically running out of legit prescription opioids. And there's even a mention that there's a national shortage around the time they begin this investigation because of COVID. So I'm curious as to how he's accessing these precursors from China. Where is this coming in from? At one point he talks about one guy that he's working with. They were going to go into business together, who was helping him with this illicit operation, by the way. They were going to go into business together and start a used car dealership. And I thought, well, here we go again with another cash-only business, or potentially could be cash-only. Are you using that to, in my mind, are you going to use that to launder money? Are you going to use that to smuggle things in or out? I'm just curious how big this all is, because I feel like it's huge, not just the distribution of all and the manufacture of these pills, and just how they were trying to get around all the safeguards that were already in place to keep from alerting authorities and to keep these drugs flowing to where it was most financially beneficial for them on the black market. But who else was involved? Who was buying this? And it's probably not just your average street person down there, in the projects. It's most likely people who can afford these kind of things, and those who can't afford it. But, people who just want to party, who maybe aren't addicts yet, or maybe they're wealthy and they can't afford, high priced drugs to go party on or whatever. I just feel like there's probably a lot of people that are nervous right now, whose names haven't been named, but potentially could be. Who are all the doctors that either were working with him or were not? We're just beginning to dive into some of these reports. And I want to clarify something, too, that I said earlier, that I don't think they've had their first appearance yet. They did as far as like being first appearance.
Bond.
They had their bond hearings, but they haven't had their first appearance. And I think that's coming up on the 29th of May. And that's most likely when we're going to see them plead not guilty. But I don't think they've actually done that yet. But I just want to be clear clear just from a reporting standpoint.
Right.
I'm not trying to indict, convict. These are all allegations. We are simply reporting what is in these arrest reports, and we will hear from them whether or not they want to plead guilty, not guilty, or if they're all going to want to turn and say, him made me do it.
Yeah.
That old Steve Burklow, you know, he's the one that did all that.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm Monique, the wife, or if I'm Dave Winkles, I'm going to be like, this guy, what can I do to help?
It definitely
to
will
reduce
be,
my
right.
sentence.
It will definitely be interesting. And I don't think people set out each morning to go, let me train wreck my whole life and everybody by me. So some bad decisions, very bad decisions, and things like that. But to answer your question about the precursors and stuff, we deal with it every day. For instance, if you need a decongestant like Sudafed, you used to go buy it in the store. Now you need Sudafed, give me your driver's license, because the pseudoephedrine and the ephedrine that's in Sudafed, those are the precursors for methamphetamine. So, and also, let's don't kid ourselves. I doubt any of this is what it says it is, you know. And so, just like with spice, those basically, it's supposed to be synthetic marijuana. It's basically grass clippings that have some pesticide on it that'll make your mind crazy. That's what my nephew got into.
Yes.
You know, and then with these things, nobody cares about purity. Who's going to stand up and yell back at the drug dealer and with China, the way I think it happens, I think it comes in through cargo, through different things. You know, whether it is like a bunch of party favors from someplace over there that makes them cheaply.
They're smuggling it in.
Or clothes or shoes.
Well, it's what they're doing with fentanyl. And you and I read up a little bit on that last night about just how fentanyl was coming in. And basically, it's precursors. Fentanyl's coming in from China. It's being sent to Mexico and a lot of places. These cartels are basically making these pills in bathtubs. So to your point,
nasty.
There's no formula involved. These aren't regulated labs that are making this, so that you as the patron who maybe just want to party or get high or don't even want anything with fentanyl, they're not mixing it in a way that it's like a formula. There's just sometimes there's a lot of fentanyl that's enough to make your heart stop from the moment you touch it or inhale it or use it. And then there's some that just doesn't hardly have any in it because it's not an exact science when they're making it in a bathtub.
It just goes like this. And let me mention this real quick too. I have a thing of Narcan right here. And I just want to say, as a pharmacist and just a regular old person, that most overdoses are accidental.
Well, yeah. And just to let you know, because there's going to be a picture for those who can see, and it's one that you took when you were working as a pharmacist up in Birmingham, and you saw a woman on the side of the road they gave Narcan to, and that's this picture here. She's, for those who can't see it, basically it's a woman passed out, her car's off on the side of the road. She's almost like in a Christ on the cross type position, passed out because it's on a hill, so the car's kind of sideways. The car is holding her up. She's leaning back, and it's holding her up, and I just thought the irony of it, but she's got an AC/DC shirt on that says Highway to Hell, and I'm like, honey, you are, you know.
It scared me.
Addiction.
I was running late to work per usual. You know, I was running, and I go down and I see off to the side, I just see a lot of blonde hair and a person laying supine, like you said, on their car. And I see a man over here just pacing. He's like, ugh. So I get out and he goes, I don't know what to do. He's a regular, like, go to work guy. And
so he had stopped to help her.
Right. And he said, what do I do? Do I go to, I said, no, because it looked like a fentanyl overdose to me, or an opioid. And so I said, don't go down there. You get caught in that, and she's going to come up, I pray, and she's going to be like a Hellcat. So what happened, I said, have you called 911? He said, no. He didn't know. He was like, he was frozen. So I called 911, and the ambulance and the fire trucks and the police and everybody got there. But I kept yelling at her. I was like, get up. I was cussing too, because she wouldn't come to, and I couldn't come down there. So I'm like, she finally came to a little bit, and she said, she just looked around, and I said, stay right there. And she did her hand like this for me to help her, and it broke my heart. But I was like, I can't, because she would have pulled me down in there, and she would have been strong at that point. But what happened then, she went back out. So then the time that the EMTs got there, they pull her out, and they said, this happens all the time. We know her. And I'm still like, well, hit her with Narcan. And they had the Narcan right there, and I was like, give it to her, give it to her, give it to her. So anyway, they did give it to her, and she came to, and it was a big old mess. But that day I went to work, and I called the Jefferson County Health Department in Birmingham, and I said, what can I do? I'm a pharmacist that practices in very honorable pharmacies here, and
you're not slinging dope.
No. And how can I help? I even felt almost powerless. So I went there. I got educated by them. I came back and I taught every single person in our pharmacy, I'm talking about everybody, cashiers, bookkeepers, delivery people, how to give Narcan. Because if you had this in your car, if I'd had that in my car, I could have given it to her if I could have got to her.
Yeah, I'm going to open this box while you're talking.
Here it is, babe.
Okay, cool.
It's so easy.
So it's in the packaging still. It almost looks like one of those little nasal sprays. Like if you have, allergies, you just spray it up your nose.
Like that.
Okay.
Well, here's what happens with this. You cannot hurt the person. It knocks the opiates off the receptor site. So when you give that to them, you stand back, because once that opiates knocked off that receptor site, they're immediately going to go into some sort of withdrawal, and they're strong because they're hurt, okay? And it's a reflex thing. So they're doing that. If they don't come around, and after 2 minutes, which would be the longest 2 minutes of your life, you hit them again with another one. This has 2 in here. And so you give them that. And if it's not an opiate, it's not going to hurt them. It's just not going to hurt them. Just do it. So these are free in Jefferson County. People could come into our store and take a little video thing, a test. You can't fail it. You just got to take it. And then this is so wonderful. Up in Jefferson County, and I know there's places here. I just need, if anybody out there wants us to tell about how to get it here in Pensacola,
Narcan,
and anywhere, they would mail it to you after you did the little test. So, because what if you're a mother and you got a child that's dabbling in drugs or something, or if you're a pain patient and you take too much.
Right.
And I do want to talk about that the next time.
Absolutely.
About how some people are going to take too much, and it's not the end of the world. We will help you. So, I mean, this is such a horrible thing right here, and it breaks my heart. But we have got to turn this situation around to see how to help people.
I know, absolutely. Well, there's so much more to dive into, y'all. There are other business deals that other investigations that we referenced those earlier that led to this. So we're going to be talking about all of that. Pam and I are just wanting to get this on the record, basically dive into this, start talking about it, start reporting on it. But this is just the beginning. We're going to continue to talk about this Pace Pharmacy story. We're going to continue to follow the Burklows as well as Dave Winkles and see what happens with their cases and see what else comes out of this investigation. And we just want to ask you too, if you're following this, if you're a patient, if you have any information that you're interested in sharing, we would love to hear from you. You can find the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast Facebook page. You can message us there or leave a comment. You can find me, Molly Barrows, at Molly at mollybarrows.com. You can email me. You can also find Pam and I on Facebook, just on our regular Facebook accounts. I have a Molly Barrows news account. I have a Molly Barrows personal account. Pam Hill has Pie Pie.
Pie Pie, yeah, mine says Pie Pie.
On Facebook as well. So anyway, please reach out. We would love to hear from you. Even if you just have a comment or a question, we would love to hear from you. But if you have information, certainly please reach out too. But again, we're going to continue to follow this and bring you more episodes. Anything else that you would think would be important to add, Pam?
I want us to pray for our area here, and let's learn something from this, and let's just try to help as many people as we can.
Find a silver lining. Excellent. Well, Pam, thank you so much. We appreciate you for listening in as well. That is it for Pace Pharmacy, Compounding a Pill Mill. We appreciate you joining us on this episode of Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks, and especially big thanks because he is always here for us, no matter what time of day or how many times we need him, our director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. Remember, you can listen to all of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law.